Hello all. This is the video lecture for chapter 59 entitled Sounds American, Ives, Copeland, and Musical Nationalism. So half the chapter is really on Aaron Copland, which we did under the theater genre because it was a ballet, the example, and this half is on Charles Ives, and I've included it under the program music, although, well, I think it's program music, so we're going to do that. Now let me open up the PowerPoint. Chapter 59, and it tells us here that several modernist composers in the United States attempted to craft a musical style that would reflect a truly American sound. Remember that America was only a country since 1776, and European countries have been around for a long time and they have much longer history of music. So America was just trying to get it together, and the fine arts was not primary, it was a secondary element. And not until really Charles Ives is the first composer that's recognized internationally, but not in his lifetime. It's kind of an odd situation. But he does really portray an American sound that's different than European. Charles Ives drew on the music of his New England childhood. We'll talk about that. Hymns, right, from churches, songs, marches, which he set using polytonality and polyrhythms. Here are some bold-faced terms. Poly means more than one, so we have more than one tonal center at the same time and more than one rhythm at the same time that are unrelated. And then it talks about Aaron Copland, but not in this chapter, not in this video lecture. Again, what is American music? And it used the elements of America for sure, but it does have the language of the European music. And then how do you make an American music? Well, you use elements that are American, right? The Europeans did that, and so this is how to create an American music style. This painting by Grant Wood, 1891-1942, American Gothic, is an example of regionalism, right? Celebrating rural life in the United States. And just their stoic attitude, their simple clothes, and of course the church in the background is might be considered a representative picture of American values. And of course, United States now is a big country, and these different sections of the country have distinct cultures. And Charles Ives is from Connecticut, right over here. It's just a CT in New England. And New England is different than other parts of the United States. You know, the Southwest has a real unique culture. And California, different, and Louisiana, different kinds of music. And so this is from New England. Here is a picture of a New England country or city, right? And typical of something that would have influenced Charles Ives. He grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, but many churches and steeples, and he wrote a lot of music that takes elements of those, and the bells ringing. Lots of his music has bells in it, like church bells. This is a picture from Danbury, Connecticut. I don't know exactly the year, but this is the city that Charles Ives lived in and grew up in. And you might imagine a marching band performing and marching down the street. This is Danbury, Connecticut today. Here is You know, music has always been involved with the military to keep people organized and motivated, and playing a song, right? The flag, of course, and the drum beat. Disaster over here. Even to this day, or to this day, there are groups of people that celebrate their history of music, because during the Civil War, and this is important, that 10% of the soldiers on the North and the South in the Civil War were in the band, at least for a period of time. And at the end of the day, the bands would perform, and it was so weird. They'd have a battle and then stop it. Like they would be in sight of each other. And the North band would play and the South band would then play. And sometimes they'd play the same songs and play them together. But Robert E. Lee said that the music at the end of the day was more important to a dying soldier than food or rations, food or medicine. Here's a performance of a Civil War style band. Short. An example of the Federal City Brass Band. An example of a band that Charles Ives may have heard when he grew up in Danbury, Connecticut. And this is important because this is what Charles Ives might have heard when he was growing up, born in 1874, after the Civil War, in 1954. But his father was in the Civil War and was a band leader in the Civil War. And this is important because when Charles Ives' father returned to Danbury, Connecticut after the Civil War, as musicians from the Civil War returned to their hometowns all over, they took their instruments with them, and music was a great entertainment. And these cities in New England would have little central areas, perhaps like a little park with a gazebo in the middle, and the band would set up and perform on Sundays, and people from the community would come and view the band, and then for different occasions the bands would march through the streets. So being a band leader was an important individual in the community. And one of the things that affected Charles Ives' way, Charles Ives' father taught him music. And one of the things that the father did with his two children, Charles and his sister, was he would play the piano in one key and then have their children sing the same songs but in a different key. Like, this is impossible to do, but would be great ear training. And his father would do the experiments, like he'd get two pianos and tune one out of tune compared to the other one, so that he could play between the two pianos, one note then another note. And normally we have 12 notes, chromatic notes, between an octave, between C and C, C sharp, C, C sharp, D, etc. But he, with the two pianos, could have 24 notes inside that same octave. And of course, Charlie heard his father doing these experiments. His father would do these things where he'd have his band that he was the director and divided into two groups, started each end of the street, played two different songs, and march through each other because he wanted to see what it sounded like. And this is kind of an American attitude that I'm going to do it my way, and I don't care if it's never been done before. and I just want to try it. Interesting that Charles Ives went to study at Yale, which is in New Haven, Connecticut, and studied music. And he was careful when he wrote music that he didn't offend his teachers, because the way he wanted to write music was not what he was doing, he was just following the directions. Incidentally, he was a pitcher on the baseball team. I think that's kind of really cool. And then when he graduated, when Charles Ives graduated in 1899, shortly thereafter, he wrote this piece of music that we're going to hear, Country Band March. But when Charles graduated, he knew that the music he wanted to write, he was not going to be able to make any money off of, and it wouldn't be accepted. So he got a job in New Jersey as an organist, because he was an organist at Yale. And then he started working in New York City, just across the river from where he had the organist job at the church in New Jersey. And he entered the business world in 1899, so he was like 25 years old. And within 2 decades, he was head of the largest insurance agency in the country. So he became wealthy. But in 1918, right, when he was 44 years old, he had a heart attack, which really was a setback for him. And because he was working full-time as a insurance businessman, and he was also writing music feverishly, but nobody heard him writing this music because he just kept it aside. After he had the heart attack, he never really wrote a lot of music after that, but he lived until in 1954. He would invite people over to play some of his music because he just wanted to hear what it sounded like, and people then encouraged him that what he was doing was very unique and individual, and he should start to promote it. So he wrote orchestra music, like 4 orchestra pieces, 4 symphonies. He wrote a lot of choral music, over 100 songs, and he wrote a cycle of symphonic poems. Very prolific, actually. So here, Country Band March. It's for large wind ensemble, so it's not for orchestra, right? And why is it a program music? Well, because the title tells us it's a country band march, and then it has this realism of amateur bands playing out of tune, bad entrances, wrong notes, and he uses, Charles Ives always used the tunes that he grew up with, that you find that are like a collage of music in the piece, and songs of London Bridge, Yankee Doodle, Arkansas Traveler, Stephen Foster songs, and even part of John Philip Sousa's March. So the piece of music is in 5 sections, and again, it's like this collage of different things that happen. So let's listen to this piece. What else do I have to say before we listen to it? So again, the piece of music is nostalgic, right, as far as his Protestant New England upbringing, and he has certainly a great sense of humor. And from the textbook, they tell us again that it simulates the realism of an amateur band's performance skills by having musicians play out of tune, bad entrances, miscount, and hit wrong notes. So as time passed, it's curious that Charles Ives wrote this music that was, and some of it is string quartets are just really out there. And you would have thought that he had heard Schoenberg's music by listening to Charles Ives' music, but he had not heard any of that European music that was really whacked out. So anyway, let's listen to this Charles Ives Country Band March. Incidentally, it's performed by the United States Marine Band. didn't mention the sounds of fireworks, right? Always fireworks at public events like that, and you can hear it. Those spontaneous drum shots that really represent fireworks. One of the Charles Ives is one of my favorite composers, and that's a pretty good example because all of his music at some point, well, most of his music has patriotic songs inserted that are not complete, but just little wisps of these tunes. There's a piece he wrote called "The Pond," and it's so gorgeous you'd swear you feel it makes you feel like you're sitting right by the pond, and you can hear the frogs croak and feel the mosquitoes biting when you hear that piece of music. I'm going to play just a little bit of a piece called "The Unanswered Question" from 1908, and it is also a kind of a surreal piece of music. And the question is not stated, but well, the question is not answered, right? The question is stated, and the orchestra starts, and you have the flutes and then the trumpet, and they are like in a debate. And one answers the question, and then the trumpet tries to answer it, and then they says, "Well, that didn't answer the question," and it kind of goes on, and it's like, what is the question? And but it's pretty powerful piece of music. So, yeah, the unanswered question, it's the trumpet keeps asking the question, and then the flutes try to answer it, and they get more frustrated trying to answer it. And at the end, the trumpet answers says, well, you didn't answer the question. And of course, I think that there is no answer to the question. Okay, that concludes chapter 59, the part on Charles Ives.